And what I'm really curious about is, do you spend time thinking about trying to be the symbol that other people see you, or it's always just trying to remain true to yourself?
The name of the game is trying to remain true to yourself and to be authentic. For some people, it's more natural than others. For some people, it's very natural, and for some people, it's a struggle. In today's day and age, as an artist or someone who's involved in being public with social media, it is very tricky and very hard to try to stay pure to yourself and not to be influenced by others and what they think. Portion of my career that I spent, you're not going to please everybody, and in the end, you're going to drive yourself somewhat mad in that process.
Today, we have Matisyahu on the podcast, a man who needs no introduction. I am personally very excited for this one because as I thought about the concept of second self, Matisyahu was actually the first person that came to mind. His story is one of self-exploration, identity, spirituality, courage, and many more themes that we'll unpack. Welcome to the podcast, Matisyahu.
Hi, how's it going?
What's going on?
Oh, no.
Thank you for hosting me in your home as well.
Of course.
So getting right to it, after all the versions you've lived through, the kid with the dreadlocks, being Hasidic, now going through a new exploration of self, who is Matisyahu today when there's no image to maintain and no identity to hide behind?
Well, just to start with the facts, I mean, I'm married, I'm a husband, a partner. So that's one thing. I'm a father. I have 6 children. And I am spend a good portion of my time. I manage myself and sort of release my own music. So you could say that I'm like a music manager, running a record label of sorts. And I'm an artist. I'm a creative person. I like to think about things, often how things filter through my experience and through my life. So through identity and all those things, I'm interested in ideas and creativity. And then I'm a writer. I like to write lyrics and raps and melodies. And I'm a singer. I like to sing and also a performer. So I would say that is pretty much the majority of the things that make me up. In the Kabbalah, like in Jewish mysticism, it gets into who is God. And when it talks about that, it's talked about the idea that pleasure and ratzon, tainug and ratzon, desire and pleasure are very much tied to who a person is. There's like the name of a person is how they're called, how they're looked at from the outside by others. And then there's like the person, the essence of the essence of the thing. And the essence is tied into like pleasure and desire. And so on a deeper level, if you go beyond that, the things that I enjoy, I love ice hockey.
Really?
Yeah, I'm really happy when the playoffs are on, like now. I love being home. I'm kind of like a homebody. I also like to travel for music, for the purpose of music. But I don't really travel outside of that, outside of when I'm going to travel for music. I don't like to travel. I like being home.
You've been on the road quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's a good. I mean, I like. There's a lot of things that I enjoy or that bring me pleasure or that I have a desire for, but maybe we'll get into that like later we
definitely will.
Into the interview. Yeah.
You touched on such an interesting thing there. I was going to get to later on in the podcast, but now is a good time of in the Kabbalah, I forget the words you just used, but how other people see you versus the essence. And I think the story for you is so interesting because of, being Hasidic or at different points having an identity of especially visual. Other people were tied to what you were symbolized. And what I'm really curious about is, do you spend time thinking about or trying to be the symbol that other people see you, or it's always just trying to remain true to yourself?
The name of the game is trying to remain true to yourself and to be authentic. For some people, it's more natural than others. For some people, it's very natural, and for some people, it's a struggle. In today's day and age, as an artist or someone who's involved in being public with social media, it is very tricky and very hard to try to stay pure to yourself and not to be influenced by others and what they think. So it's not easy especially for young people. I have like kids who are doing music and starting to do music, and that's a very tricky road to walk down. That luckily I'm a little bit older and I've had some experience with it, but I mean, there's a lot of back and forth with that. As an artist, as a musician, what people want from you, or what a label wants from you, or what you think your fans want from you. And it's tricky to actually hone in on that. Like, for example, if you're trying to do what your fans want from you, your perspective on what you think they want from you may not be in line with what they actually want from you. Not to mention that you have different fans that like you for different reasons. So if you spend like a portion of my career that I spent focused on that, you're not going to please everybody, and in the end, you can try to give like everyone all of you, but you can't worry too much about other people.
That's really interesting. It's an interesting insight. Do you feel the weight of being a symbol at all, especially now in today's age, which is like so much anti-Semitism out there, even especially in the music industry? Obviously, Kanye West, I don't know if I saw last week at Coachella. There's not many artists that are Jewish, that have a Jewish identity. So I'm curious, do you feel like you have to step up in that sense, or how do you think about that? In terms of
again, like for me, it comes from an inner place, and when I do something, especially at this stage, I'm kind of like, it has to be something that I believe in. So the answer in short is no. It's not something that I really calculate, or on October 7th, when the attack happened in Israel at the Nova Festival and in the south of Israel, I was in Las Vegas and I was performing at a reggae festival, and my son is in Israel, and it was Shabbos, so I couldn't get in touch with him. And I kind of, was worried, and then I went backstage to like my dressing room, and I kind of like had a little bit of a feeling of sort of being out of place, like wanting to see a familiar face or another artist maybe that was Jewish, and maybe we could do something together, make a little post or something. So I like looked up a friend of mine who just basically ignored me. And when I tried to reach him, he was performing at the festival. Everyone that I know also that knows him was like giving me the runaround. So it turns out that he like specifically didn't want to identify as Jewish in that environment.
Wow.
And
that's
me.
Really he identifies Jewish outside of that.
People know that he's Jewish, but he's not like gung ho, Jew. And in his scene and stuff, like it's not necessarily something that anyone knows or talks about or anything like that. But yeah, so for me, kind of the opposite thing happened, and I got on stage and I saw immediately like someone with an Israeli flag, and like pulled them up on stage and wrapped myself in the flag. And I went back to this place that I had kind of been in about 10 years prior to that, when the BDS was protesting me in Spain, and they had me like thrown off this festival, and then they got in some trouble. At that time, that was considered like, not okay to do that. And to an American Jew, someone like Israelis have always faced, problems.
At that time in the world,
yeah,
it wasn't okay to do that. Now it's like,
that's what I'm saying. Now it would be totally
fine.
It would be expected, actually.
Yeah.
But like now, I've had like on my last tour a year ago, protests and shows canceled and all of that, and it wasn't like, yeah, it upset the Jews, but it didn't and some of the fans, but most people in society would just be like, oh yeah, of course, but 10 years ago, that was a different story. And like I said, like Israelis have always faced that, like when traveling abroad, whether speakers or musicians have had incidences and things like that. But an American Jew, I think it was like maybe one of the first times that the BDS really took a stance, and that was in Spain. And immediately there was backlash, and immediately they like apologized and asked me to play the festival again. And I went, and there was a big pyramid of protesters blocking my view with signs like Matisyahu and stuff like that. And immediately, like I said, like one of my joys in life is ice hockey. I played ice hockey growing up and stuff. I kind of like turned into this kind of like when I was on the ice and someone would like go after my goalie or something, I would like want to rip their head off. Now I can't do that, but it gave me a certain kind of fire in my performance.
Oh, wow.
And so when I am faced with like some kind of anti-Semitism, my immediate gut instinctual primal reaction is to like come up against it. Maybe that has to do with like maybe in another life or something like that. I don't know, but it's who I am, and that's always been a part of like Matisyahu, of my identity as an artist from the time that Matisyahu was born, and even before.
I love that. I can very much relate and resonate with that, coming from two fiery Israeli parents.
Yeah.
So
and so now you have a paradigm.
You're a fighter is a big part of that identity.
Yeah. And now you have a paradigm shift in Judaism in America, because up until this point, without the anti-Semitism, you had sort of like religious Jews, the Orthodox community, and there's all different degrees and variations, but essentially you had like the Orthodox Jews, and then the Reform Jews, most assimilated American Jews that have very little to do with Judaism, other than the fact that they love Seth Rogen movies or Larry David movies or Lil Dicky, and Benny Blanco. I mean, there's or Matisyahu, right? So basically, up until there's been a split. In now after October 7th, you see the religious thing kind of takes a background, and you have kind of like two types of Jews, basically. And there's Jews that want to be, in the face of anti-Semitism, kind of like want to be more Jewish and want to like step up. And then there are the Jews that are sort of like afraid and want to just be quiet and kind of like hope that no one finds out that they're Jewish, or ask them the question if they support Israel or whatever. So, so there is a shift. That may be one of the good things that comes out of all this.
Wow, that's really interesting. And you and through that experience, you felt that fire come back, not just in relation to the religion, but it affects all aspects of life.
Yeah, and at that point, like I made it a point to say, like, I stopped playing. I had been playing shows on Shabbos. I stopped being religious to some extent, and my focus over the last several years has been like, less philosophical, less about God and spirituality, and more about like the immediate surroundings around me, my family, and my role as a father, as a husband, as a business person running a business, as a just trying to be a responsible adult and stuff. And I still have been take time to be creative and every single day and kind of dip into that part of myself, but it's no longer like the main ruling force over me. It's something like I can switch on at a show or in a recording session or when I walk the dogs, you know what I mean, if I want. But it's
wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's not like the thing that's running me like it was for a good portion of my life.
Yeah.
And therefore, a lot of the religious stuff I had my issues with throughout, being religious, being super religious, being Chabad, being Breslov, and going into all these different, realms and stuff. So anyway, that wasn't the focus. But after October 7th, like, I decided, okay, I want to have a space where Jews can go, where we can get together. And so like, I'm not going to play shows on Shabbos because I don't want to exclude the Orthodox community from coming to a show. If I'm playing in Cincinnati and it's the one time I play that year,
Wow.
I don't want the religious Jews shouldn't be able to come, right? So that was one thing. And then as there started being like protests and shows canceled, and then you start seeing like my fans who are like 80%, I would say, not Jewish.
Really? 80%? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, my fan base exists in mainly in America. Well, if you go on Spotify and stuff, it's like the Philippines and South America and stuff. But in terms of shows and where I play and how I make a living, it's markets across America. It's 60, 70 markets across America, whether it's Tampa or St. Louis or San Diego, or some of the markets might be a little bigger than others. But basically, when I go on tour, I'm playing, from 500 to 1,500 people in all these different cities. And it's not just the major cities or the secondary cities, but it's smaller places also. And those people coming to the shows are some Jews, but mostly like the fans that have been listening to my music over time are not. So the fans and the Jews themselves on that last tour coming to the shows had to kind of put up with a lot. They had to go through what I like to call it like Mitzrayim in order to get into the Holy Land. They had to go through, literally be funneled through security and people spitting at them and yelling at them.
That's insane. Holy shit.
And then they would like come in and like, it was like, okay, here we are. And so that was very special to me. So, I've made a point of like hiring someone who specifically now like reaches out to Jewish organizations and synagogues in every city that I go to try to offer them group tickets and get them at the shows. But, that kind of happened. It happened organically, happened naturally, like over the course of the last year and a half. And me just personally, I want to now be more Jewish because of all of that. It's not calculated. It's like primal. And so how do I know how to be Jewish? Well, I myself luckily spent a good portion of my life on this journey of Judaism. So I put on tefillin, or I light Shabbos candles, or I eat matzah. A lot of it is tied to the religion, even though I don't like consider myself religious. But that shift happened with me to kind of like, based on what was going on around me, shift me back into, in terms of my identity, like being, I guess you could say, more Jewish, again.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a divergence, and I see that exact thing happening after October 7. I was never not proud to be Jewish. I was always proud to be Jewish, but I started wearing Magen David. It's like when I was in England most recently, people told me not to wear anything that could represent me being Jewish because it's just dangerous.
Yeah.
And I even felt that, even in saunas, like I saw someone having conversation. We started talking. I have some family members that live in Israel. He left the sauna. So it's like, I for sure resonate with that. Like, when push comes to shove, like fighting, being able to stand up and having that fire within you. It's primal. That's a really interesting way to put it. But we'll get back to some of those topics later on. The topic of second self is first understanding the first self, and then we can get here, come back to this. So interesting themes throughout your life. I've listened to a lot of different interviews, and I would say courage was one that really resonated with me. And it happened at a really young age, even, when you were 14, it's almost like you wanted to be different. Maybe there was fear in that, but maybe there wasn't. But, when you were 14, you were the kid with the dreadlocks. So what was going on with you during that time of your life? And did you even feel courage, or was it just something you wanted to just be different?
Well, no, I don't think that I necessarily wanted to be different, but
okay.
I guess when I was 14, I would go back to like that age, like I would feel there was a shift between 13 and 14. Like, even if I like look at pictures or whatever, like at 13, I was concerned with girls. Like if you looked in my bedroom, for example, you would see like cutouts of Victoria's Secret magazine, like plastered all over my wall. And I would wear sometimes a tie to school and cologne.
Wow, really?
In my hair. And I was never like, I wasn't really into learning. I was kind of a little bit of a clown. I was okay at athletics, but not great. And yeah, I definitely was into being cool and girls. That was like what I was into. I played ice hockey and skateboarded and listened to music like normal kids. But I would say that was like, in terms of my identity as a 13-year-old, that was what was kind of made me special. And I remember going to bat mitzvahs and like the other kids being on their the other boys being like on their Game Boys and stuff. And me and my friend would be like dancing, and we would be like all the girls and it would be like surrounding us, and we would be doing like dance offs and stuff like that. And we started getting invited to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs of kids that we didn't know from neighboring towns.
No way.
From like Scarsdale and stuff. Yeah. Just because they knew that like Matt Miller was coming, to dance and shit,
Wow.
That was like early days. And then I would say there was a shift, like when I started listening to Bob Marley. I think I was like 14. I probably smoked my first joint. And I listened to Bob Marley, and I started liking reggae music. And around that time, I broke my collarbone, so I missed my hockey season. And that was like, I started getting like heavier into it. And then into music, into reggae music, into smoking weed, and the ideas about maybe spirituality, or maybe I was reading some books on Buddhism or something like that, or meditation, just starting to kind of get like a little bit more open. And then at 16, that summer, I went to like a hiking outdoor camp type thing in Colorado. And I think there, I remember, we did like a sweat lodge, and I remember like being in this little sweat lodge and then like jumping into this creek, freezing cold creek in the mountains, in the middle of the night, and like looking up at the stars and kind of having this first kind of like starting to actually think about God, the idea of God. And I remember that came along with this feeling, this incredible feeling of loneliness, of emptiness. And, you would like be sitting on a mountain looking out, and, just a massive empty feeling of being alone. And I kind of like, sometimes like you think about like God and your first experience of God or whatever, and you kind of like glorify it. Or I might, fast forward to, 6 months from then, when I was at a Phish concert in Worcester, Massachusetts, and dropped a hit of acid for the first time and experienced that music. I might want to say like that was my first experience of God. That was an incredible experience.
I was curious, before we get to that one, because that's definitely interesting. What about that first kind of experience of God made you feel so lonely? I think that's just like
that's kind of what I'm getting into, is that like, oftentimes when people talk about their first experience of God, they think of some blissful, ecstatic feeling of unity, which was something that I had felt, right? Like, but when I started thinking of God, or like kind of going down this path, it wasn't that at all. It was like this feeling of the opposite of loneliness that was kind of driving me towards that. I don't know what that is, but that feeling started around then, and it didn't go away until when I met my first wife, my second wife rather, my current wife, or maybe when I had kids, or maybe like when my career kind of, no, because I had that during my career for sure at times.
Do you think that the feeling of loneliness was always kind of like, because I noticed that was the other thing, even the story you were sharing before about October 7th at the reggae concert, you're always kind of like, the outsider in the aspect, or the lonely person in the room. Like you're the Hasidic person doing reggae, or, someone who didn't grow up in the Hasidic movement now becoming part of it. Like, do you think that was maybe a part of that journey?
There is something there. There is definitely a piece of that is connected to who I am. I guess. But it's interesting because it's like it's like I had this teacher once, and he like used this metaphor one time of like this strange bird that no one wants to be near, but then everyone loves their music. Everyone loves like the song that they sing.
Wow.
I don't know, a kind of interesting idea, but either way, outsider, insider. I'm just thinking about your question of feeling like an outsider, and
Yeah.
I guess a good portion of my life I felt that way. Yeah.
Did that impact your creative process at all, or your ability, your maybe desire to make music?
For sure. Absolutely. I mean, making music for me was a place to escape that. That was a place to when listening and making music, and then like that experience that I had at that Phish concert, this feeling of complete inclusion, of complete being a part of something. Like if you think about like a Phish concert, for example, as opposed to a show where you have like the band on stage and the audience in the dark and the lights shining at the band and everyone is looking at the band and watching them. At a Phish show, you have lights that are being projected into the audience and around the entire arena to like create this feel that you're kind of all together. And what's happening on stage is like the most boring thing in the world. It's like four middle-aged nerdy white guys from Vermont playing their instruments, and yet, if you take psychedelics and you kind of like have a hush or like a feeling for music and you get into it, you'll find yourself feeling like completely like part of the whole experience. So that's why one of the things that I felt about being inside a Phish concert, listening to music,
felt that inclusion as in music was part of that experience. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was just saying. So this first experience of this emptiness, let's call it, right? Then I went to Israel that fall. And so I experienced like what it is to be a Jew in Israel. And that was a tremendously, impactful experience. The education was cool. It was like you learn about something, you go see it, you hike, it was like a physical education where you get to actually partake sensory wise in what you're, studying. And that was a wonderful experience for me. And then, so, I mean, I forgot what your initial question was.
There's a few different events in I think most people's lives that are inflection points. In your life, there were many. At 16, took acid. I believe was it for the first time at the Phish concert?
Yeah.
So you took acid for the first time at a Phish concert. And for you, that was an inflection point from what I understand. And that was it sounds like you had clarity that you'll do music for the rest of your life. Was it scary at all during that experience where it's like, it sounded like you had a lot of clarity that this is what you're going to do?
It was a desire. And it was not a plan or anything like that. It wasn't like my plan came into vision that, I'm going to do this. It was more like this feeling of like let's say, for example, a fish that's out of water being put into water, right? Or like, let's say like a border collie, right? Because I have border collie. I love border collies. Like a border collie that's grown up in a suburban household where it gets walked like once a day. And then you just like put it on a field in Scotland with a bunch of sheep, right? So yeah, me being in that Phish show, I think like on a psychedelic, at that age was like, okay, this felt like, okay, this is like where I exist, right?
Wow.
In this music. Yeah. So, so that was a fundamental moment for me.
So it wasn't, you didn't know what that meant yet. You didn't know that like, I'm going to be a musician for my career.
I sort of always wanted to do music and performing. Like as a young kid, I was in acting, I was in music, I was writing rap songs in 4th grade. And so I was always like into that. And I always knew that I wanted to do that from the time I was like as early as I can imagine. As I can remember, I was dressing up, with guitars and like pretending to be a rock star and stuff. So I knew that I always loved it. I didn't learn how to play any instruments because I didn't, have the discipline or the focus for that. And at a certain point, I started figuring out what it was that I do, and that was around that time, like I knew that I had this voice inside me, and I had sang before, but I didn't know like how it was going to come out or how it was going to express itself really, and I wasn't concerned with that so much. At some point, it just kind of happened. It kind of clicked, and then it was like breadcrumbs. Like then I just like followed the trail. Kind of interesting. Like around that same time, I remember I had like a day trip, an acid trip at Rutgers University with my neighbor, Jeff Galley, who drove me to school every day, who was a couple years older and a deadhead. And we went there. I think he had a friend in school there, and we went there for the day. We took acid. And I remember sitting in a field and seeing this Rastafarian with like a goat and like a package just like walk through the field, and I'm like, does anyone fucking see that?
Rutgers.
And I don't know that anyone did see it. And I saw him like plant like put a gift like in the dirt, and then like walk away. And then I ran over there, and I don't remember what happened after that. I don't remember if I found it or not, but it was like I saw this guy singing Rastaman chant. This white kid, Nature Boy from like Georgia or something. And he was a hippie, he had dreadlocks, and I was living in the park. He was like, I think, living in the park in Burlington. We were getting ready for Phish tour. I was 17. And like I heard him sing Rastaman chant with a drum. It was like rainy day. There was like a few people there. And the way that his voice like carried it, like it just, boom, it like hit me. And then like, I just knew also that I could do that. I just knew I could. And then I tried it. And the first time I tried it in front of someone was just like, what is that?
Wow.
Sing it, do it again. And like, do it for these people over here. Like that's what I mean. It was like, there were certain gifts that were like given to me. And then I just like followed the trail because I just reacted to it a certain way. Like the first time I heard Sizzla, the music of Sizzla Kalonji or Buju Banton, or, and eventually I was, just listening to music at that, absorbing it. And there was no YouTube. So I'd find instrumental cassettes of like hip hop beats, like on Canal Street and down in the village and stuff. And I would just sit in my room and I would just write, and I would rap and sing and do that kind of reggae flow. And I would do that for hours and hours and hours. And eventually I went to like an open mic and like did it. And it was before I was Hasidic. I just looked like, a white kid at the new school or whatever in the village or whatever. And people would like...
Were you taking on the identity of like the rock?
I was just very straight looking. Like I looked like you, I just had like short hair. I had nice like maybe preppy clothes or whatever on. I don't know, maybe a little baggy, but I had already at that point gone through like some certain transitions.
Okay.
So, but it was like, it was just a thing from the get-go. It was like, how did that come out of that? Even before I was Hasidic, I would like go to like the Lion's Den or like somewhere in the West Village, open mic night. There'd be a band on stage. I was youngish because like most people in there were probably a little bit older. And then I would like put my hat on, a name on a raffle to get called up for the open mic. And then I would ask the band if they knew No Woman, No Cry. Then I would sing that song, and like I would sing the verse and the chorus, and it would be like, people would be like, wow, he sounds like Bob Marley. Like that's, incredibly moving. And then for the second verse, I would just start spitting like Sizzla type, like raps, like the King Without a Crown style of like reggae rapping or whatever. And then people would like lose their fucking shit, So, that was the voice, like that became, I found my voice, and the reggae thing was part of it. And part of it was a mixture of other things, beatboxing and Judaism and rap music and whatever, Phish and all the things that had influenced me like up into that point. And then when it came to that point, everything that had influenced me and me knowing that, like going back to Tainug and Ratzon, like desire and pleasure, like knowing that like this ultimate pleasure exists when I express myself in music, when I hear music, but also when I enter myself into it and I express myself good, then my Ratzon, my desire was all about how do I get this? How do I have this? Right. And at that point, so once I kind of like found my voice, found what my real desire.
This was still teenager before.
Then this is college now. This is, but still before Matisyahu. So this is like, I'm at the new school in the village, and I'm sitting in with musicians that are at the jazz school, at Manis Jazz School. I'm meeting different musicians, but I'm spending most of my time just practicing by myself. I'm not I had been performing prior to that when I lived in Oregon, and I had like a band when I was like 18, and we played, and I got like to really like feel what it feels like to be on stage in front of an audience, and like how to have that give and take energy. And I knew I had that, like that charisma with the audience, and like, but I hadn't developed like that real skill yet. Right. So that happened like when I was back in New York and I was in school. And then right at that point, right. So that right then I like dropped it all, like at the height of like my Ratzon and my Tainug, because I didn't have it yet. Right. Like I'm waiting for like an hour just to get on a raffle to like, maybe I can get 16 bars right. That's, like a rapper who's trying to get the mic, So basically at that point is when I became religious and when I became Matisyahu. That was when I just said like, okay, I have to like do some major inner shift.
Wow.
If I am going to be blessed like with this thing that I want so bad. What is the ultimate way to do it is to like kill the idol, to destroy the idol. What is the idol? The dream itself, music itself.
Shit.
And the only way that I can like...
You were conscious of that decision at that time, or did you realize it later on?
It was a process.
Because it was a process. Especially for a teenager to have those types of...
No, I'm on like 20 at this point.
But still, that's...
I've already been in wilderness therapy. And I had 4 vision quests where I fasted for 3 days on a mountainside and dropped out of high school when I was 17 with like quarters in my pocket and went on the road and lived in a park. And I had all gone to Israel. From like 16 to like 21 was like already 5 selves, right? This whole already the process of the self journey had been like, I was in that, so I was already on the other side of that.
And you surrendered, you gave all that up, the thing that you enjoyed most in the world that gave you energy.
Yeah. So that was the thing that was like, okay, it's one thing to like be on a self-discovery and like go to synagogues, read books, visit with rabbis, meet people from different communities. It's another thing to like accept the idea that like Orthodox Judaism is like the rules and the laws are real. They're real for you. They're not just like something. Like you actually are going to do them and like follow them. And that shit is not fucking easy. It's
no,
especially for someone like me. So,
wow, that is an
so that process I knew was about like defeating my ego, was about like humility, and was about trying to become like a new version of myself, a better version, like caterpillar to a butterfly. Like there has to be this breaking process, and the journey and self-discovery and everything in therapy that I had done up until that point was enough for me to know that even though this was like my own thing, like I wasn't part of some group that was doing it or a religion, that I was like, it was like, okay, like I know that in order to be this, I have to do something drastic. I have to do this. Like I have to I have to like really become the thing.
Wow.
So yeah, so like to become a star, you know, I have to like really go all the way. I have to destroy it all. And then in that process,
it reminds, have you seen the movie, what is it, the British movie with like the magicians?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, with Hugh Jackman?
Oh, yes,
And
I do, yeah.
the one scene this reminds me of is like they were watching the Chinese magician, and they're like, how does he do it? And they're like, it's not an act. He devoted his whole life to playing this part. He gave it all up. He gave up even just walking straight.
Wow. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that's kind of like reminded, like you were able to like fully, you had to,
and like a decision. It was like, what better way to do it than in my own religion, right? So a lot of people would like, like Buddhism would be more interesting to me or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I was like, okay, I'm gonna find that in Judaism.
Wow.
And then when I was in that, it became evident to me that in order to really do that, I could do everything. I could wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and be the first person at the mikveh every day and daven for 4 hours and learn for 12 hours. And, you know, I could do all of that. But as long as I was holding on to this idea that I was going to be a singer one day, that I was going to make music as like a mainstream artist or something, that I didn't matter what I did, that I had to destroy that.
That's crazy.
And then I did. And then
it's the whole thing, you know, even spirituality, they have this whole concept. Once you surrender, once you give it away, the universe gives it back to you.
And then it
really did that.
Given to me like
that's insane,
crazy way. Like, for example, you know, like a couple years before that, I was, you know, on tour following Phish, and I was tripping, looking at Trey, and I was like swearing that like Trey was telling me like I'm gonna make music with you, like you're gonna come on this stage, and now you're tripping, right? So you're you have these fantasies, narcissistic fantasies and stuff. Everything is about you and stuff. So it's hard to know what's what. But you know, I'm like, as a 16-year-old or whatever, I'm just like feeling that, right? And then literally after all of this, which is only the course of a few years, I'm on stage with Trey at Bonnaroo.
Wow.
Singing No Woman, No Cry in front of 50,000 people.
That's fucking insane.
You know, and like, so for me, it was like, and I'm Hasidic, and I'm doing this, like, but it's blowing like everyone's mind. People like are like, when the radio people play, if they play the song, then they go, now look at the picture. Like, you know, it's like this thing, you know, and like, how did this happen? And I didn't follow any of the rules of like, I didn't play on Friday nights. I didn't like, you know, and it all happened very quickly. So for me, it was like very much like, oh, wow, yeah, this is really like, it worked.
Did you ever ask like, why me? You know, so many no,
I always,
because that sounds like such an insane.
I always felt like whether maybe that's part of like a artist or spiritual person, even kind of, there's a certain kind of like self kind of ego thing that's tied to that, to believe that you could do that or be that. So I always felt that I was special.
When you were there, it was kind of
when I was a little kid. Maybe it has to do with my mother or something. I don't know, but Jewish mother, you know. But I always felt like I was somehow like special, even when I didn't know what it was. Even when I was like at rehab or something, or I was like, you know, in a dark place. Like I mean,
always, especially if you want to become something in this world, you know, no one's going to believe in you if you don't believe in yourself. And that's the nth degree. It sounds like,
well, yeah, not everyone is like that. Some people feel like they're nothing, and then they have incredible experiences and are incredibly successful. And that question would be like, when did you? So everyone's different.
Yeah,
you know.
No, but I find that to be really interesting. So taking a few steps back, and on the topic of psychedelics, I find to be such a fascinating one, especially for you, you know, who had such a strong Jewish identity. I think in, you know, a lot of the religious world, they're scared of psychedelics. So for you, do you think that you would have had this life path if it weren't for psychedelics and having that acid trip at that age? Do you think life?
I think I would have. I think that it was like, it's in my nature. I think that psychedelics kind of like, they give you, if you're taking micro doses of it, then no. But if you're taking like how we used to take psychedelics in the old days,
no more these days.
No, I mean, I'll still do that from time to time. Not very often. Maybe like a couple times a year.
Okay.
But I think that it gives you like a lot right away. Like it gives you like do the Kabbalah references, like they talk about Oros and Kalim, like the light and then the vessel that holds the light. And then in the first creation of the world, the vessels basically, like the light was too strong for the vessels, and so it shattered. The world shattered. And the second time around, the vessels are pretty strong. It's like the lack of the light, kind of, in a way. Like they mask the light. They like cover over it.
Interesting.
So that you can't really see the light. You just see the vessel. But so so for example, if you're going through the world that way, you're living in a family, you're part of a society, you go to school, and you're living in a world of physicality, of vessels with very little light. And then someone gives you like a drop of light, which isn't just a drop, but it's like, right? So that's why people say psychedelics are dangerous, because if it's like too much light, the whole vessel could crack. The brain could just like not be able to handle it, right? And people go through psychosis and have a psychiatric break or something. But if it's the right amount and the vessel can hold it, then you're gonna have this an unbelievable experience. I believe it is all very much related to you, and it is certainly related to your surroundings and your senses and everything that's happening around you, but it all comes back to kind of you. It's kind of like turning yourself inside out, or like spilling your own psyche like all over the world. So all of the things that you see are kind of a reflection of yourself in some way, and that experience is like tremendous, especially for someone who's like 16, kind of wild and, wanting to experience life. So, but also, I do believe that there is like a natural order to things to some extent, and that psychedelics they kind of fuck with that to an extent. So
interesting.
So it's sort of like oftentimes you could kind of have this experience, like have this tremendous experience, and even be able to retain it to some extent. You could kind of like it's like in Chabad, they talk about the short, long way, or the long, short way. It could become like the short, long way. Like the end goal might take longer to actually reach that, because there has to like be like a balance. There has to be like a harmony. Like you can't just like push yourself, like hit that button, that magic button, and like push yourself and like the world around you without there being some like natural kind of flow that maybe pulls you back, And so anyway, I think that like psychedelics are awesome, but I think that there also certainly can be like a price to pay, and and they're certainly not a safe road,
Yeah.
But definitely like I said, we live in this world where
they talk about surrendering. That you have to surrender when you're on acid. You let go.
Yeah.
You don't know what the hell.
And a lot of people need that. Like you could make the argument that the state that the world is in right now is sick. Actually,
I mean, I wouldn't say make an argument. I would say that is a fact.
And you could say that part of the sickness is the lack of light. And so a psychedelic could be like the kind of almost like the shock, like before when someone is like out and you give them that shock. It could be like the thing that brings them back. It could be the thing, and a lot of people have found that people who are suicidal, who have all types of addictions and stuff, have had psychedelic experiences where it kind of like it brings healing to them.
Totally.
So, yeah.
That's really it. And how about, because you mentioned following the rules in the Hasidic, once you were all in on being Hasidic, how did psychedelics play a part of that? At least from my own experience, it's like, seems like, like looked down upon, like you need to be strict.
Well,
so how was that experience for you? Because it sounded like you were continuing to do.
No, when
you gave it up once you were.
Yeah, like several times in my life, I've like given up whatever substances that I was like using. So when I became religious, I stopped smoking weed, for example, or psychedelics, or taking any drugs. And then once I was there, I discovered to some extent alcohol, because it's more part of the Russian
celebrated,
culture, the Chabad culture and stuff. And so there was drinking, but no smoking weed. And also I was like spending hours and hours a day learning Gemara and stuff, which is like law, and it was already like not my cup of tea to be doing that. So it seemed like it was totally the opposite of what I was trying to get to. I was trying to find also like a place of peace within, without using any substances, because if you're using substances, you're messing with that, you're changing that. It's all or nothing. For me, being Hasidic was like all or nothing kind of way of life. And then as I like explored it more, obviously I met like Hasidim that took psychedelics or smoked weed, and I also started to like learn more, and as I was learning about some of like the Rebbes and the ideas and the mysticism and the philosophy, you have the side of the religion which is kind of rigid or law oriented, but there's this incredibly creative side to it, and that became like where I experienced and explored my creativity through prayer, through Hasidus and Kabbalah,
Shlomo Carly-Bach, kind of like
all kinds of different things. Like my journey within there and within prayer specifically is kind of an interesting story I can tell you. But in Chabad, prayer is looked at as important, but the expression of self, of emotion, is sort of frowned down upon. Even though like the founder of
expression of emotion is frowned upon,
like in a way, like it's considered, Chabad is like the Chokhmah, Bina, and Das, like wisdom, understanding, and knowledge.
Okay,
and it's the idea of the brain. It's like the idea of that the mind rules over the heart, and therefore you can control the heart with the mind. And so even though like the founder of that idea and Chabad was like known for like, they had to pad his walls, because when he was praying, he was like slamming his body into the walls and knocking himself out.
What?
Yeah. So, but over the years,
why was he?
Because he himself was obviously very emotional, but
he was trying to get it out of his like
I don't know, but the like Chabad that it became, like if you were, to go to 770 today, Eastern Parkway, not all of Chabad, but the like main thing is this idea of like humility, and which is kind of why it kind of goes into what we were talking about before, where it was the right place for me to go, because I needed that kind of militant, kind of disciplinary kind of idea about squashing the ego, and the idea of self and self-expression and emotion and all of that is kind of like in some ways the opposite of that. So the idea being that prayer in that way is like not really, like you're not really supposed to be so expressive, and as a singer and as a artist and creator, especially in that way, that was hard for me, right? But eventually I was in Jerusalem. I used to go for like the whole Tishrei, for like, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. I would go for like a month with my family, and I would pray in different synagogues. And I was like walking on a morning. I don't remember what holiday it was, or if it was Shabbos. I feel like it might have been Sukkot. It might have been even Rosh Hashanah. I don't know. It might have been Rosh Hashanah. Anyway, I heard this noise, like this incredible incredible sound. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? And so I'm Hasidic at this point, and I'm walking through this ultra Orthodox neighborhood, and it's getting louder, and I'm getting closer to it, and I see it's coming out of a building, and it's a noise that I've never heard. I've never heard a noise like this before. It's wild. It's so loud. It's so many voices. I can't tell if it's yelling. Is it singing? What is it? And I go in, and it's Hasidim. It's a certain type of Hasidim, Karliners Hasidim, and they scream at God. They scream at the top of their lungs, and it's in melody, but everyone is in their own melody. It's not like a group melody, like a Karl Bach, or, it is, everyone is in the same place in the prayer book, saying the same words at the same time, but they're screaming them, and they're screaming them to melody, and somehow it's all in key.
Wow.
Together. And I was like, this is awesome. So
they all kind of had their own individual expression going on, it sounds like, at the same time.
Within it at the same time. As opposed to a group singing the same song.
Wow.
Right?
No, that's pretty powerful.
And so, I met with the Rebbe there, and the Rebbe said, basically, when you pray, it says your prayers are a double-edged sword, and like we go to war. Like we go to war when we pray.
Wow.
And so, even within different Hasidim, there's so many different like places to explore. So I came back from that trip looking for that type of synagogue.
Okay.
And it was like a search. I found one in Borough Park, another branch of that same Hasidim, only that they do the same thing, but extremely fast.
Okay.
So like the I think it was the Pence Karliners, they accentuate and draw out like every word, so it's like really long.
Yeah.
But it's loud, so you don't.
There are underlying. I imagine there's underlying meanings behind that, the speed and the nuance to it.
A lot of it becomes just like the custom of what it is. But this other group is like rapid fire. It's a whole like another experience. It's also awesome, but it also was far from me, Borough Park, and I was recording like the Light album at that time with David Kahn in like the meatpacking district, and so I wanted to find a place like that. There was nothing in Crown Heights. But Williamsburg was like on the way, so I started searching Williamsburg. In Williamsburg, I found 2 synagogues that pray that way. Ultra Orthodox places. One of them was barely a minyan, and it was this old Rebbe, beautiful blue eyes and like white mane and beard. And I think it was like his great grandson or something, led the davening in this old little building. And often I was the 10th man. There was like barely a minyan. There was a mikveh downstairs, and I had timed out when the Rebbe would toivel in the mikveh, and then I would go right when he was coming out so that I was in his mikveh water. And then the guy that led the davening did what was called Tikon Chatzos, which is like, it says King David would wake up at midnight, and he would sing and pray and study and cry to God like until sunrise. So this guy would do that. So by the time that we got there at like 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever, he had already been going for like 8 hours and was like on fire. And
wow.
That's where I like learned how to daven, was sitting like at that minyan and, contributing. And that was something that was cool for me.
That's pretty incredible. I mean, even for me, someone who grew up as Jewish, it's like I'm learning all these different things about, religion, how powerful it can be in that sense.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm curious about though is why did you feel the need where you had to have the physical identity of, in the sense of like you have to give it all up. Like why do you have to have payas, yarmulke?
Yeah. A few reasons. One of them is it's my nature. So like when I was a kid and we played like army or whatever, I would fucking dress like Rambo. I swear to God, I'd have headbands on and bullets wrapped around there. By the time I was like, come out to play, everyone was like done already. So it's in my nature to take on like the physical attributes of whatever it is that I'm into. When I like discovered reggae music and Bob Marley, I started growing dreadlocks.
Yeah.
Right? So it's part of the nature. But that being said, I was at the New School. And the New School,
and for those who don't know what that is,
it's a college in Manhattan.
Okay.
It's a very progressive college. And I was taking a course in Black Studies, I think it was. And the professor, it was mostly white kids, and the professor was pretty controversial and pretty awesome. And he kind of flipped it back on us to ask us the question about our own identities and what it means to be white and coming from that background. And it was around this time, and around this time that I was starting to think about Judaism and getting into it and stuff. And, I came to the realization that as a Jew, you can express your Judaism or not. You kind of have the privilege or the choice to do that. Many people, not everyone. Some people you look at them like, that's a Jew. But I mean, but basically, and whereas people of other minorities, Asian, Black, Spanish, don't have that privilege or whatever to be able to do that. And I thought,
that's really interesting.
I thought, like, why should I have that? Like, let me wear a yarmulke,
Wow.
And I also was...
I've never even considered that. Yeah, it's really interesting.
I also was becoming interested in Judaism, was on this spiritual Jewish kind of trip already. So, and I had met these 3 brothers that had a band, and they were the most dysfunctional group of humans that I've ever met in my entire life. But I met them in synagogue the day that I decided I was visiting my parents in White Plains, and instead of going to Bet Am Shalom, where I was bar mitzvah, the reconstruction, the shul, I told them on like Friday, they picked me up from the train. I said, drop me off at the Orthodox synagogue. And they dropped me off there. And these guys came in late, and they started doing their own thing as everyone else left. And they were like incredibly talented, like singing harmonies and all Karbach music you mentioned before. And I had never heard it really. And they're beating on the bima and drumming. And I was like, who are you? And they were like, who are you? And I was like, I became like their percussionist in their band and would sing background. And once in a while I would like rap or something. And they toured and did like the Orthodox circuit of like different youth groups and stuff that was going on. And it always would be like, they would be late, or like their car would break down, or like, they would have to turn around, or they wouldn't bring the gear, and they'd be like fighting the whole way. But I would go, and when I went, I would wear a yarmulke, because they asked me to, I think. So I had a yarmulke. That's why I had one,
Wow.
And then I was taking that course, and 9/11 had just happened, and my grandmother got sick, and we couldn't fly, and we were going to drive down to Florida to visit her in the hospital. And it was Rosh Hashanah was happening. It was like 3 days before Rosh Hashanah, I think it was. And we drove down there, and I remember like I just went in, I put the yarmulke, I woke up, I put like a yarmulke on my head. I like looked in the mirror, I was like, it kind of fits my head, it looks all right. I'm like, I'll give it a shot.
Wow.
I went down for breakfast. My family was like, what the fuck? Why are you wearing a yarmulke? We're not in synagogue. Like, I'm like, they kind of like left me alone. They're like, all right, here we go. And
it wasn't the first time, but
yeah. And then we drove in the car, and the first gas station we pulled over and was like sort of the South, like maybe Virginia or something like that. And I forgot I had the yarmulke on, and I walked into a gas station, and I like immediately noticed like people were looking at me different than what I was used to. And then I fucking realized I had the yarmulke on. And then I never took the yarmulke off for like 10 years.
Dude, you enjoyed being proud, like the representation?
I started to feel that, I wanted to represent myself as a Jew. That was who I am. And that it was what I was, studying, and I was starting to live and do the mitzvahs and all that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be, I was going to start eating kosher and all that.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I started wearing it.
And how about, so you mentioned, with I'm really curious is, you're fully immersed in being Hasidic. Part of that, you mentioned the rules being that, you get married, you have kids. So you married your first wife after 3 dates, had kids. Was it after 3 dates? Shortly, kids shortly after.
Yeah.
Kids shortly after. What was going on with your family and friends at the time? Did they feel like we lost Matthew at all, or did you still have a what was going on with that?
Oh, well, everything was kind of happening at the same time, like kids and my career. And the career was like...
And how long were you into the Hasidic movement where the career started taking off?
Let's see. So I went to yeshiva, I would say about 2 years.
Okay.
2-3 years. And then part of, like, when I started playing shows, the part of the deal was like, you have to get married. So then I started dating, and then I got married immediately. And then everything, like what I was saying, like that, how it blew up very quickly within like a year, everything, I was like, on the radio and MTV and stuff. So all of like marriage, my first 2 kids, and my career all happened like very quickly at the same time. So my family, everyone was fucking stoked because I had disappeared into yeshiva, and I'm sure my parents thought they had kind of lost me. And now I'm coming back with a vengeance, with grandchildren for them, and a fucking career as a musician, something they can be proud of. And they're into music, and they're essentially hippies and stuff from the 60s. So they were stoked. So that was just a period of a lot of light, Yeah. And I was coming out of a place of working on my kalim. I had been for 2 years, had no light.
I was referring to that period where it was like,
kalim.
Before the career and that. But
so when I went into the yeshiva, I think
I'm sure that might have been scary for them.
Yeah,
of like, what is going on with our son?
Yeah, I didn't have too many friends.
Okay,
so I didn't really have friends that were worried,
because it's easy for people to get behind you when you have success.
Yeah, I had no friends, and I had just my family, my parents. My sister was busy with her life and college and stuff, and my parents, I had already we'd already been through quite a bit, so I had already been out of the house since I was 17. So, they were kind of, this is what it is, so, but yeah.
Got it. And then, so you mentioned, the topic of ego, I think is so interesting because first off, I think a lot of musicians and even people who have success, a lot of that is driven from ego. And you mentioned having to give up or kill ego as part of your, the way to become Matisyahu and for the universe to give that back. How about once you had the fame and you were blowing up, and especially, through when your song was the song of the Olympics and whatnot, how was your experience with ego like at, going through all of that? It's almost like it feels like almost like an impossible task to have the ego,
Yeah. I don't know. I felt, somehow, I don't think I was consumed by my ego. Like I'm sure that
even at the height of the fame, like,
yeah,
no,
I
really,
think there are some people that like, that's their trip, like that's their demon.
Yeah.
Right. So if someone like that gets power, like Kanye or something like that, then you start hearing stories of, crazy shit that they do, right? That's not okay. So I think that some people, it's a really bad recipe. For me, I was more self-destructive in the sense of like not allowing myself to take it in, to enjoy the success, to feel satisfied, to feel accepted, or to feel to be able to appreciate it, to kind of like, I knew it was awesome, and I loved every bit of it, but I was always kind of like pushing myself, searching for more, looking for more, and part of that is more fans or more record sales, but I don't mean it in that way. I mean like how to make more out of it, how to make more out of the performance, out of myself, out of the band, out of what was around me. And sometimes that expressed itself in different ways. Sometimes it expressed it in me like retreating, into self-destructive behaviors and stuff like that.
Like what?
All kinds of different things, like when everything is taking off, the idea of like being able to turn things down and like, move slowly or move at a pace that you're actually capable of, as opposed to, this is, I guess, where the ego plays
in terms of like the touring, like you mentioned, like be on road 300 days a year, stuff like that.
Yeah. And so this is where the ego plays into that. So in that sense, the ego is not like some raging like lead singer, like throwing M&Ms at people, right? But he's like the guy who believes like, yeah, I can do another show, I can do another tour, I can still be around for the kids and for the wife, and I can still daven 5 times a day, 8 times a day, 20 times a day, and I can still like meditate more and I should be more spiritual for these people because if I'm on stage and I'm not connected, like, so how do I get that, and how do I push myself to go there? And sometimes, like I said, it could be through like, in a healthy way, like it's, at times it was like, man, like, learning with my teacher and him sending me notes and studying this stuff and then taking like long meditative walks. And in negative expressions, it could be like drugs and alcohol on stage, you know what I mean? Like pushing yourself in that direction, or kind of like a certain kind of angry kind of discontentedness that kind of like people can sense off you, even like the fans, for example, or people that are coming to see you, or there's so many different ways it can express itself, and that the ego plays a part in all of that, and like expresses itself in those ways,
How did so it sounds like a lot of the self work you had done really allowed you to prepare at least for the fame.
It's a really great point. Is that for the first few years of like the onslaught of like all of that fame and all of that, I had come from such an extreme the other side that I was prepared. I was like, still taking my glasses off on stage, not touching women, never going out, not, eating separately from everybody, not hanging out, I was very guarded, and then as, I became completely in that world, right?
Did you feel the pull of that at all, or you were just
of going from it, starting out that way, and now all of a sudden I'm living there, right? So I'm going from one tour to the next tour. I live on a tour most of the year, or backstage at a festival, or on an airplane, or in a hotel. And so now that as time goes by, you start asking like questions like, like, am I supposed to just like sit in my room and eat my food separately from everyone else while they're in Brazil, like out at a restaurant, like hanging out with locals and eating local food? Like, where is that godly, right? Where is that, like, how is being disconnected from everyone is, so then you might start to go out and do that, try to figure out, how do I do that? Can I do it and still be kosher? Can I do it and still, how do I mix these things? And that process over several years, you know what I mean, starts to unravel, and you can kind of like, there could be different outcomes.
Yeah. So through that, what you're describing, it sounds like that was the turning point of when you started seeing maybe the rules being shackles more than anything, it sounds like.
Yeah, and
the rules of being Hasidic and all that.
For me, the release from it all came from a different place. It came from a different stage where I was like, I had pretty much released the shackles within, and I had felt the emptiness go away, and I began to feel the light. And when I it settled, and I realized that it was real, it wasn't going anywhere, I realized that, well, at that point I said, I don't need rules anymore. I don't need like any of the trimmings. I don't need any of the extras. And I literally shaved, like went naked. You know, I also went macrobiotic, and I weighed 162 pounds. I'm 6'4", you know, so I literally shed everything.
Wow.
You know, and that came from like this place that I kind of arrived to at that time. And, you know, the journey continues.
And that experience that you described of shaving is a really interesting thing, from my perspective, happened, which was like, that was the point where you felt so connected to yourself, so aligned with yourself, where you didn't need the shackles. But when you shaved, you put that out there on the internet, and your fan base was unhappy. Yeah. How did that feel? Which is like, my fan base is supposed to support me, not just what I represent, not just me being a symbol. That sounds like a whole...
That was a dark time, like a little bit of a dark place. It was also the beginning of the internet. So I didn't have any practice on social media and how you're supposed to navigate.
It's like Twitter at the time.
Yeah, Twitter. And how you're supposed to navigate comments, you know? And
how did you handle comments?
Well, I was like so vulnerable. I was just like reading everything and
okay. So you weren't like...
No, I was reading.
It was just reading.
Well, eventually, yeah, I was attacking people, but I mean, I was reading everything and taking it to heart, and like thinking that every person who had like a mean thing to say was like actually probably a really smart person who like really knew what they were talking about, you know. And so yeah, so I don't know, why were we talking about social media again?
Oh, well, we were specifically talking about the experience you had of when you posted yourself on social media, and at that point was like, you know, I imagine the best point, the best feeling connected with yourself enough that you don't have to have physical identification,
right,
and for your fan base to then.
And I expected that people would kind of like get it, and it was a very naive like place to be in, because I don't believe I had a publicist at the time. I didn't roll it out. You know what I mean? I didn't roll it out with a story about identity, about change, or about who I am and what I believe in. You know what I mean? Like, there was no podcast, you know, about self-discovery or second selves, you know, rollout of how are we going to present Matisyahu to his fans in the world without a beard, right? So, you know, I had a cyst on my vocal cord and was really struggling with touring and shows and singing and overworking myself. And I moved in to my voice teacher's bedroom on the Upper West Side, this older man, Daryl, who kind of like just took me in and was like, we're going to fix your voice, you know, and we're not going to get surgery. You know, we're going to do this. And so part of that was vocal silence. I had to go on complete vocal silence if we weren't working together. That was for months. And then at the same time, I had a stomach issue that I decided I wanted to try to heal through macrobiotics. So I was eating like brown rice, chewing 30 times every bite, and no sugar, no processed foods, or, you know, only very specific foods. So I was going through this experience. And I'm sorry, I lost track of where we are. What were we talking about? Oh, the where I was like when I shaved, right?
Yeah.
And so in that process, like in that experience of like not speaking and not having like any vices whatsoever, not even food, I actually like found like happiness. Like I actually would fall into these meditative states where like, I don't know, I just tapped into like my senses and sensories and emotions and clarity of thought. And it was like a high. It was it was high. It was very humble, but like a feeling of being elated.
It's interesting how that that had to happen with your voice being taken away.
Yeah.
Which represented, you.
Something had to be like shooken up.
Yeah. So it was like, like it's what seems like such a huge problem in your life ended up being, life-changing.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's a huge blessing if you can like, when things happen, if you
able
can
to have that perspective,
be able to kind of roll with it and kind of roll it into what, kind of, I guess that has to do with faith, like, whether you believe in God or not, but like trusting that somehow if you react to things a certain like way with like wisdom and humility, then, whatever that thing was that seemed to be an obstacle will actually like this, again, a Kabbalistic idea will like soften. It's called like the sweetening of the Gevuros, like, and you see that within a person, even like a person has anxiety or fear. If they meditate, they sit with that feeling as opposed to trying to run away from it, and they internalize it until that feeling actually like it melts, it becomes something else, like a knot you have, like a good masseuse is good.
Yeah, they rub it out,
put pressure on it, on the point of tension,
and that's
until it releases.
Yeah.
So and then once it releases, it becomes something new. It flowers into something new. So, so that was like that.
It's a pretty powerful.
But so the point was that I was kind of like living in this very pure kind of place, and I realized that I had shaved, and that I had a show coming up. It was like my first show where I was going to sing after this cyst and stuff. No one like knew about it, or I wasn't like on social media talking about it. I don't even know if there was really a platform yet for that. And I went out. I knew I kind of like had to like somehow like tell people, so they would like, when I got to the show, they'd be like, "That's Matisyahu." They might not recognize. They might be like, "What the hell?" I was reading like a comment on Twitter, and someone posted like a lyric like quoted from Matisyahu, and was like, it's like the last half of it is like, "When the time comes, I'll lose my disguise." And I was like, oh, that's fitting. Sometimes I'm like writing lyrics and I don't really know what it means, but I know what it means. Like I know what it means, but I don't really know, like if you ask me like, what does that mean? Like, what's that in reference to? It will be like hard for me to describe it. I might not even be able to put it together like in my own head. And,
so it was like at the time, like subconsciously, you like
still like almost some prophetic kind of subconscious thing, and it'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, like that makes sense for me. There were times where I may have thought earlier in my career about shaving, or about like moving into a new realm of being a new experience, but I felt trapped, or that I wouldn't be able to do that. And then it was like coming into fruition, and I'm reading back a lyric that I wrote, years ago from the album Light. And it's like, when the time comes, you'll lose your disguise. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I meant. Like, at this point, like the beard is not like who I am. And it is this disguise of like my Matisyahu identity of how I'm presenting to the world. And, that's pretty cool that a fan like quoted that and it related to their life. And they're sending it back to me at this very moment that I'm trying to decide how I should present myself to the world. So boom, I'm just like take a picture and put it on Twitter and quote that lyric again, like as a retweet or whatever. And that's what I did. And so therefore, being that I was like 160 pounds and had been living in like my voice teacher's like apartment, I looked as if I had been like on heroin or something. And it looked like, oh, Matisyahu shaved his beard and is like a drug addict, like it was like a tile bathroom, like it could have been like a subway bathroom or something. And so when I'm talking about like reactions and rollouts and like sometimes you do things and you're just like being real without thinking about how this is going to look to the rest of the world, that could hurt you. It could come back to hurt you. It could if you don't present it in the right way. So. That was the case there. And there was a lot of like bad feedback. And then I was like pretty vulnerable in reading it. And I think that was a time of feeling like pretty pretty crushed after that. Yeah.
Did you have feelings of regret at all?
No.
Even through, how about,
not regret, because I don't know, like, again, my personality is more like
being
when there's conflict to kind of like come up against it. So I kind of was like, oh, fuck them. Like, they don't get me. Fuck them. Like, I'll just do my thing,
Yeah. Then going back to maybe like
more rebellious.
Isolation.
I'm more rebellious by nature.
Yeah.
I guess in that way.
Yeah. So even when you shaved the beard, you didn't even have the thought process of like, does this affect Matisyahu as the symbol? Does this affect my career? Like, none of those thoughts were even going on.
I didn't really care about
that.
Because I had been now doing it, you have to remember, already for probably over a decade at that point.
Yeah.
And when I say doing it, I mean like really doing it, like
doing the
on the road, like 200. No, like as a musician.
Okay.
On the road, like 250 days a year. I'd already tried all types of things that like artists shouldn't do, like not play your hits or improvise for 90% of the set, or not look at the audience once during the set or ever address them. I mean, all kinds of things, or like stage diving off of like 3-story like fucking platforms. Like, I mean,
that was the rebellious side.
No, like I'd already like gone through so many different like experiences, which like we haven't gotten into, even like the music or live music or the experience of that, because that became like my obsession and became like where when we were like talking about Ratzon and Tainug before, like desire and pleasure, and like the early stages of like, how do I get this? Because this feels so good. Once you then have it, and now it's kind of like driving you, because like you have to say yes to the shows and you have to keep going and you have to like try to build your audience and then you have to get better. So now it kind of like inverts on you. And then also it's what's like providing your entire livelihood. So you're getting like money from it now too. So
we're saying like the gift becomes the curse in a sense.
And also it becomes like, there's fans attached and what do they want? And there's so many complexities to it.
Yeah.
Whereas in the initial stage, it's like a first like love, like when you first see the girl that you love and you're just like, she's like, and you're like, I want that. And now you're like in a relationship, a real working relationship with it. So at that point, I was already like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if fans walk out, or if I play for 500 people instead of 5,000 people, or
was it just like this?
If I never get radio play, or a manager wants to drop me, or I kind of like, again, that's part of my nature. So it had kind of come to that. So therefore, like when it came to like in the positive light, like shaving and what that was for me, and like the stuff actually that I was doing that was positive, that felt good. I certainly didn't care, what people were going to like.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
But I did, because I read those comments and they hurt. So in fact, I did care, but not enough to make me do something different or regret it even.
Did you feel like, like life at the peak of your career? It sounds like it's an interesting place, because like like you said, you're trying to maximize it 300 days a year. And like you said, the gift becomes a curse almost.
Mm.
Did you have a realization, like did it ever occur to you of like, this isn't like what my dream was like, isn't what I envisioned it to be? Or like how are you thinking about that? Of like,
I always had mixed feelings about it, because on the one hand I felt like, well, what else? Like I could be like a pizza delivery boy for the rest of my life. Honestly, like I don't know, I'm so blessed. I'm so appreciative to have this and to be able to do this. And then at the same time to not have like the maturity to be able to process it and kind of like take it in and, but I felt, I guess, that, life is about like, this is my life. And, life is about like, kind of like figuring it out. And that's kind of like one of the exciting things actually about life is like the process. So, so balance constantly with immaturity and reacting in ways that aren't healthy, with making good choices, processing, growing a little bit, this kind of like constant like movement and eventually, coming to wherever I am now with it,
Yeah. And when you had that realization where it's like, I don't need the, at least physical identification of my appearance to showcase my identity, it sounded like also at that time, there was also a religious component where you didn't need as well. So why did it wasn't not even just like all the rules, but maybe even just the religion in general. So was there like, what was going on at that time with that?
I mean, at first, like for example, like when I first shaved, I was still religious. I just, I just was sort of like not maybe, it's hard to describe. I was just kind of like on my journey with it, I was still doing what felt right to me. And so I was still like going to the mikveh in the morning and going to chakras and davening with tefillin on. And then, as time went on, different things shifted, but at first for me, it wasn't really this or the religion, I was still pretty religious.
So we've spoken a lot now about, the journey of Matisyahu as a person, as a human. Naturally, music and a creative outlet is an expression of self, and that changes as you change and develop. So I would love to hear how the messages in your music have changed to where you're at today. Like, how is your creative process different from how it was when you were, peak Hasidic and whatnot?
My creative process, let's see here. I guess I kind of like, it's kind of like, there's like a system to it, or like a habit, or a way that it kind of unfolds, over like, the course of time, but it's kind of shifting or hopefully shifting because of just the natural state of like how music is. I think when I started doing music, it was different the way things were done, in the sense that like an artist would put out an album, they would promote and tour with that album, and then they would kind of like take some time away, and they would like, start making a new album and record that album and make a record deal and get the art and everything together for it. And then, after, a year or two after the album's already been finished, the album might come out, and then they're going to start performing those songs that they wrote 3 years ago. And so when you're talking about, especially like what we're talking about in terms of second selves and rebirth and all of that, and art and creativity, it's kind of important that it lines up with like where you're at. And in terms of the authenticity of it, of like wanting to sing the songs that you write when you write them and share them with people, because that's where you are, as opposed to this other way of doing things. And so like what I find for me is touring is constant. That's always how I've made a living. And even though I tour differently now than I used to, it's still like I almost treat it as its own thing. In terms of songwriting and recording and the songwriting process, I will like not write for long periods of time. Like it could be like right now, it could be months or even a year or more of me not writing a single lyric or a journal entry or anything. I'll basically, be experiencing my life. And during that time period, I'll be listening to music. I'll be listening to whatever it is that has kind of like touched me or has grabbed me. And usually it will be like one or two artists. And I'll explore that artist, I'll explore that genre, I'll explore other artists similar, but usually there'll be like one or two artists and a few songs that will really like touch me, that will inspire me. And at a certain point, I will like feel an itch to start writing music.
That's amazing.
And then I'll start searching for music similar to what it is that's inspiring me. And I'll do that by either like in this last album, last group of songs that I made, I got in touch with this song club. And so Songwrite Club, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
And basically, you know, I basically like share with them those artists, those songs that.
What are those artists and songs right now that are inspiring?
I'll get into that, but and then they'll start sending me like beat packs from different people, or I'll just like go on YouTube and search instrumental versions of that song or similar songs, or I'll kind of find instrumental tracks that I like, and then I'll start writing, to these things on my phone, like in my notes section, and I'll write a lot, and then I'll start thinking about, okay, how am I going to like make an album, you know? And I'll try to connect with a producer or various producers, and like sometimes it's a producer in the sense of one person who is going to help me figure out the album. Am I going to like, you know, get tracks from different people? Am I going to have my band create the music? Am I going to have a combination, or, you know, and, you know, recording it and all of that? And then sometimes it would be more pieced together, like just getting beats from people and then doing recording sessions separately from that. Then I'll start like organizing it all into songs, you know, and then eventually there'll be like, you know, 15, let's say, songs done, and I'll start thinking, okay, now I need a record company to release this. And so I'll start trying to find a record company to release it. Or like in this case, the last few songs I released myself on DistroKid. That whole process takes like 3 years.
Wow.
Right? So by the time you're releasing like an album, you're kind of behind the mark already. You're already like into the next album cycle. You're already in the process of the next thing before you've even started touring and playing the songs that are, you know, the rest of the world is starting to get. So why I like what's happening with the change now in music, and what I'm trying to like also do myself, is to not do that anymore. To just basically instead of looking at it as an album, look at it as singles or songs, or just art, or just could be 3 songs, could be an EP, it could be an album, it could be a mixtape, it could be whatever it is. But making music and then literally sharing it when you're excited about it and playing it, and at the end of it, you take 12 songs and you put it together and you call it an album, you know, and then you can sell it on vinyl. Mm-hmm. So if someone wants to have the experience of the album listening, they can do that. But basically, it's just like making music as you go. And doing that, I've kind of shifted also, because it used to be like, oh, the next album is coming, right? And so this is like representative of a whole period of this person's life, of this artist's life. And so how am I going to be different? How am I going to say things differently? What are the different subjects, kind of relates to your question. Like, how can I not repeat myself? How can I come up with different ideas and different ways to express myself? And now what I found is, in this new way of doing things, what's really cool is collaboration, because, you know, you can, first of all, like, it's okay. It's like, it's okay to repeat yourself. It's okay to like sing about the same ideas that you once did. You know, as long, you know, for me, it's like creatively, I don't want it to necessarily sound the same, you know, but in terms of the ideas of it, it's like a person or an artist may grow and change and stuff like that, and have like different things that they get into. But at the end of the day, like their Rutson and their Tainug, like who they are, their essence is kind of like locked into one or two things. And like when you listen to that artist, those are the things that you are going to like constantly come up. The question is like, how deep do those things get through? You know, in some songs they might get through in one way or in a different way. So, yeah, I mean, basically in terms of collaboration, I found it's like a good way to get outside of just your zone, first of all, and to be able to like continuously put out music, to be working with other artists, other talented people who do not just in my case, like musicians or producers who do what I kind of don't do, but people who actually do what I do, like singers, rappers, writers. Like, you know, you get in a room with like 7 people who all do what you do and are all on the level, you know, you're going to come up with some incredible stuff. And at that rate, you can just boom, you can just put out more music. Now, this isn't like rocket science. This is what, you know, artists like Drake or whoever people have been doing for a long period of time. But for me, it's kind of a newish territory.
Yeah.
And
not having more of the freedom because you're independent.
Yeah. And I'm enjoying it, you know? So anyway, that's where I'm at.
On the topic of collaboration with other artists, you've collaborated with a wide variety, ranging everyone from Avicii to NBA YoungBoy, a wide gamut. Who has been a particular artist for you that you were kind of wowed by their own, you know, artistic or creative kind of genius in the process?
Well, my experience with YoungBoy was pretty awesome. He was on house arrest at that time, so I kind of like had to get through some different, you know, barriers to get to his house. You have to get permission from the government and everything, and I got like up to his pad. You know, it's like surrounded by, you know, women like with machine guns and like turbans and
modern day Scarface.
It was pretty epic. The Uber driver was like, "What the fuck is this?" But, and you know, the whole way that came about was that I heard this video that someone asked him, who does he listen to? And he said 50 Cent and Matisyahu. So that's why I reached out, and he was like so cool. It was like so unique. Just the way that he kind of like his presence, I would say, was like just kind of, it reminded me of like if I was meeting Michael Jackson or something like that. Yeah. I never met Michael Jackson.
Yeah,
I don't know what Michael Jackson was like, but like he's like so soft spoken, but like kind of like almost like a snake charmer or something like that. Like he kind of just had like a certain way about him. And then when he actually like produced on the microphone during that time, it was pretty, his like melodies and like his I don't know, like the way that he was expressing and like doing it, you know, doing the thing that we do was just like fucking dope. There's no other way to say it. It was fucking.
And you haven't released all that music yet, right?
I haven't released any of that. Yeah, I don't know. Like, if I can, I have to obviously like get permission for that. So I don't know when that'll happen because I'm pretty sure he's in jail. But I guess he could still release music. I don't know. We'll see.
That's cool. Yeah, a little interesting personal anecdote, especially because, you know, I ended up creating a rap media company. But growing up, my mom, you know, was very religious, would say, stop listening to the rappers, listen to Matisyahu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's pretty funny, even just like going back to that. But how about for now, as like, you know, you're collaborating with really interesting artists in this stage of your career. You're now independent. What is something that you want to be remembered by more than just this now, the symbol of Matisyahu?
I don't know. I don't really care. I don't think
that.
Because like when I'm dead, it won't affect me. You know, what people think about me. You know what I mean? I don't really think about it like legacy and that kind of thing.
Okay.
I don't know. It doesn't seem, I'm sure it matters to me. Maybe I just haven't unpacked it, you know?
Yeah. And now your son is an artist as well.
Yeah.
What have been some of the
sons? Two of my sons, yeah.
What have been some of the most important lessons you've taught them about maybe how to handle fame, creating music, or just lessons along the road of like what have been some of those?
Fame is pretty far off for them because they're just you know, starting out as artists. But even, you know, with them, you know, you can see how everyone is different and how like fame like is really how it rubs up against one of them versus the other one, you know? So, you can see like what people's challenges as a father. You see like, okay, you see your kids ideally, and you see what their challenges are. You see what their qualities are. And then you try to help them recognize both and figure out how to develop their weaknesses, how to lean into their attributes and not be blind to their, blind spots and stuff. And that is that process of being a parent. So when it comes to like having a kid who does music or like does what you do, as it's just a huge blessing because you're able to take all that in the context of what it is that you do and give it over to them. So that's a huge benefit like that they have. Or if you're a kid who ends up doing what one of your parents does, because there's no kind of coach like, that cares as much or has the knowledge of both the student and the sport that they're in, or whatever.
You've lived this incredible life. Not just, the podcast is called Second Self. I don't know how many lives you've had at this point.
Yeah. As I'm like my back. Yeah.
And you're still reinventing yourself, which is awesome. You're still going through your own journey. It's all part of the process, as you said. What is something that you would tell your 17-year-old self who's just starting out in this entire kind of journey?
Man, I wouldn't want to say too much because I wouldn't want to change things, because I really believe like, all right, what would I like? My initial thought is like, chill is what I would tell them. Like, chill, chill the fuck out, like, don't, take everything so seriously. Don't like get, so, obsessed. Don't get so drawn into things. Don't, so, like as a father speaking to a son or like as an older me being like wanting to alleviate some of the anxiety and the, suffering, I would tell him to chill. But I wouldn't want to tell my 17-year-old self to chill. I'm assuming that I'm not just
anxiety and the suffering is what pushed you to become that.
Yeah,
so
and I'm assuming that I'm not just saying it. Like if that 17-year-old self would actually listen to what I was saying, then I wouldn't want him to chill. I would want him to like go all the way and push all the way, and continue and do that. But I would want him to do it and have the realization that he should be more chill.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I've learned a ton. Your stories are fascinating, and I've just learned so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. And yeah,
thank you. No, that's it. I don't know when this is coming out, but make sure that you check me out on my new music and all of that, and come to a show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matisyahu world.com.
There we go.